After recovering from childhood trauma, a man with an extremely rare gift finds a little girl with the same gift. The girl is in mortal danger, and he must help her. We are located in Florida in 1981. In the middle of nature, a family is out camping. The little girl named Violet tells her mother that she is going to pick some flowers. She wanders into the woods, where she finds a woman sitting alone by the lake. Violet curiously approaches, and the woman introduces herself as Rose the Hat and charms Violet with magic tricks. The girl then notices other people creeping nearby, watching them. Violet is frightened and tries to leave, but the woman holds her back. The woman's eyes light up, and in a wink, all the people around her walk over. In the next scene, we can see Danny wandering around a hotel. It is the scene featured in the film, The Shining. Danny Torrance is still recovering from the trauma of his ordeal at the Overlook Hotel. After this nightmare, he wakes up and goes into the bathroom, where he notices a person in the tub. He immediately closed the door and pissed himself in fear. A moment later, his mother woke up and asked him what happened, but Danny didn't speak. As part of his shining powers, Danny can see spirits like Dick Halloran. Dick has the same gift as Danny, and he shows the kid a trick to keep evil spirits away. He shows Danny a box he can use to trap them. Wendy then runs to find Danny on the bench, but no one is beside him. That same night, Danny and Wendy are watching TV together. Danny decides to do as Dick told him and heads to the bathroom, where the bathtub lady is waiting for him. Danny fearlessly entered the bathroom and used the box in his mind to trap her inside. He goes back to his mother and starts talking to her again. A few decades later, in 2011, Dan lives in New Jersey and is an alcoholic. He gets into a violent bar fight where he knocks a man unconscious and later sleeps with a woman from the same bar. When he wakes up in the morning, he finds the woman's baby and realizes his wallet is empty. He takes the woman's money, and soon after, Dick appears and tells him to put the money back. In the following scene, we see Rose the Hat with her friend watching a blonde girl. The blonde girl named Andy seems to be on a date with a man who lied about his age. Andy hypnotizes him and puts him to sleep, after which she steals his wallet and tells him to act like a pedophile when he wakes up. Andy's gift is the ability to manipulate others to do what she says. Andy comes out, and Rose, along with Crow Daddy, follows her. Rose takes her by the hand, just as she did with the little girl. They take her to their hideout, where Rose tells Andy that she has special powers that are very useful for their cult, the True Knot. Rose promises her that they can eat well, stay young, and live longer. But Andy isn't the only one with supernatural powers. A little girl named Abra Stone is celebrating her 5th birthday. Abra is not impressed at all with the magician show. In fact, in the kitchen, her parents Dave and Lucy notice that Abra has somehow floated a bunch of spoons up to the ceiling. The parents are frightened and worried, and Abra drops the spoons on the table. This magic trick seems to be perceived by Danny and Rose as well. About Dan, he arrives in Frasier to start a new life. He meets and befriends a local man named Billy Freeman, to whom Dan admits that he is running from something. Dan finds a place to stay, with Billy vouching for him to the landlord. That night, Rose takes Andy to the beach for a ceremony. The oldest member of True Knot, Grandpa Flick, leads the ceremony. Rose pulls out a container containing Violet's shine. Presented as a kind of powerful steam, Rose transmits Violet's shining to Andy, while the other True Knot members get their share. Andy squirms and screams until she has absorbed the shine. Dan has a nightmare in which he sees a spirit sleeping next to him. Scared, he goes to Billy for help. Billy takes Dan to an AA meeting, Alcoholics Anonymous. After the meeting, Billy introduces Dr. John Dalton to Dan. Dan notices Dalton clutching his wrist. Afterwards, he approaches him, saying that he had left his watch in a bathroom, something only Dalton would know. Amazed by Dan's insight and swayed by Billy's good word, Dalton calls Dan into his office to talk to him. Returning to the evil group, we see Andy waking up after the ritual. She is now part of True Knot, but no longer a human being. Dalton gives Dan a job at the hospice, since he has some experience as a janitor. During a night shift, Dan is mopping the floors when he notices the hospice cat, Azzy, entering an older man's room. Dan approaches and tries to get the cat out of the room, but the man knows that whenever Azzy enters someone's room and sits on their bed, it is because Azzy knows that person will die. The man at first seems frightened, until Dan telepathically reassures him that dying is just like going to sleep. Comforted, the man nicknames Dan Dr. Sleep. Within moments, the older man dies, and we can see the spirit leave his body. When Dan returns home, he finds hello written on the wall, with the smiley face in the O. Surprised, he walks over to the wall and simply writes, "Hi." After that, we see Abra smiling in her sleep, so I assume the little girl has been communicating with Danny since she has the same gift. 8 years later, Dan is still sober and continues to work at the hospice. During a meeting, he discusses his feelings about never knowing his father. Danny felt close to him only when he was drunk, since his father used to drink too. It made him realize that his father fought the same battle he did, but Dan chose to come out better for it. All this time, he also maintains contact with Abra, who is now attending school. In recent years, the True Knot struggle to find victims for good nutrition. They have relied mostly on the leftovers of kids with insufficiently strong shine. In fact, Grandpa Flick is feeling much weaker, but thanks to Crow, the situation may soon improve. They find a young baseball player, Bradley Trevor, whose shine helps him during games. After the game, the True Knot follows him, and Andy gets him into their van. They take him to a secluded area, where they nail him and consume his shining. His dying screams wake Abra up. The girl yells at them to stop, and Rose can sense her presence. At this moment, Dan sees Red Rum written on his wall, just like in the movie The Shining. Dan asks Abra, who? And she replies, baseball boy. The True Knot then buries Bradley in a shallow grave. Rose tells Crow that someone was watching them, despite being over 1,500 miles away. Rose states that she never sensed such power, and Crow plans to capture the little girl as soon as possible. Abra decides to research Bradley's disappearance. At school, Abra doesn't have many friends. Indeed, others consider her weird. Abra's gift allows her to hear the thoughts of her classmates. When she returns home to her room, she has visions of the True Knot and their location. After that, she gets out of bed and looks out the window. His eyes turn white, and Abra begins to float. Abra had connected with Rose, who was in a supermarket. Rose can sense her, and she was able to see Abra and make contact with her. Instantly, Abra ejects Rose from her head, which causes a push strong enough to send Rose to the floor. She is amazed by this power, but also threatened by it. Along with Rose, Dan had also fallen, as he is telepathically connected to Abra. Rose brings this information back to Crow, stating that her shine may be too powerful for the True Knot, so they must destroy her. The next day, Abra meets with Dan and telepathically greets him. Abra thought Dan was her imaginary friend, but then realized they have the same gift. The little girl told him about the baseball player killed by the True Knot. After that, Dan warns her to not use her shine in any way that would get their attention. At night, while at work, Dan notices the cat entering a bedroom, but no one was supposed to be inside. Dan notices a man in the shadows and opens a box in his mind, freeing Dick. Dick warns Dan about True Knot and also urges him to protect Abra since they share a connection. Finally, Dick lets Dan know that this will be the last time he will see him. Only Dan is aware of Abra's shining, while her parents are unaware of it. The same night, we can see Rose meditating and consequently flying over the city. Rose finds Abra's house and enters her head while she sleeps. She finds what looks like a filing cabinet and tries to dig through it, but Abra anticipated that Rose would return, so she traps her hand in the drawer. As Rose tried to pull her hand out, Abra had gotten inside Rose's head and began digging through her filing cabinet. Pulling her hand out, Rose tore her skin off. She returned to her normal body and saw that the wound followed her. After getting out of Abra's head, she reports to the others that Abra has set a trap for her, so they must hurry to kill her. Crow informs Rose that Grandpa Flick is getting weaker and weaker, as he is not getting enough nourishment. Too weakened to go on, he convulses to the point of decay, and the cult absorbs his steam. Abra wakes Dan to let him know about what has just happened. Dan decides to listen to Dick and wakes Billy to get him to help save Abra. While driving in the car, Abra gets in touch with Dan. She is guiding him to the place where the boy's body is buried. Abra showed Dan her new trick and entered his head. She found the boxes with the ghost that Dan kept locked away and grew curious. Dan told her about his life at that doomed hotel. Dan and Billy arrive at the location and begin to dig up the body. A few minutes later, they find the body and are horrified and physically disgusted by the discovery. In the car, Dan tells Abra to tell her parents everything, as they are in danger as well. They take the glove to Abra's house, but the girl's father has learned of Abra's contact with Dan and thinks Dan is some kind of creep. Dave physically attacks him, but Abra got inside his head and showed him the terrifying scenes. He is scared and worried sick after he learns that a group of people want to kill his daughter. After explaining everything and revealing their powers to him, Abra manages to track down the cult and deduce their destination. Dan has a plan and asks Abra to allow herself to be captured. Dan and Billy go into the woods and use Abra to lure the cult. After a few moments, the cult arrives in the woods and they find Abra alone outside. Andy approaches her and starts talking to her while hiding a tranquilizer behind her back. After injecting the tranquilizer into her, Andy turned around and instead of Abra, found a stuffed animal. Dan and Billy hide and start shooting at the cult members. Rose feels the pain as each of them is killed one by one. Dan succeeds in wounding Andy, but as he approaches her to finish her off, he realized he has no bullets left. Andy puts him to sleep, but Billy manages to shoot her. Nevertheless, Andy used her last breath to tell Billy to kill himself. Abra appears to say that one was missing. In fact, Crow appears next to her and captures her. Crow had drugged Abra and was taking her to Rose. Dan returns home and finds Abra's father's body, after which he tries to connect with Abra. Dan manages to take possession of Abra with her consent. Together, they swerve Crow into a tree, and since he wasn't wearing a seatbelt, he is ejected through the windshield. Abra got out of the car and watched him die. Abra walked away from the car and on the road met Rose. She wasn't scared at all. In fact, she walked right through her. Rose fed off her last remaining supplies to fully resume her powers. Dan finds Abra and takes her to the final destination. They leave to make their final stop at the now dilapidated and doomed Overlook Hotel. Dan walks through the building where the trauma of his life was born. He finds the room he lived in, still with the axe marks left by Jack, his father. Dan goes to the mezzanine and meets the bartender Lloyd, who looks like Jack. Dan tells how Wendy died when he was 20, and how he knew she was dying because of the flies he saw around anyone who was near death. Lloyd encourages Dan to drink the alcohol, which he calls medicine. Dan refuses, and soon after, he hears Abra's voice. Rose has arrived at the hotel, and Dan takes Abra inside. As soon as she enters, Abra says she smells sickness inside. Rose arrives at the hotel, and immediately upon entering, we see the scenes of horror that Dan saw as a child. Dan and Abra team up to trap Rose in the icy maze of hedges. Rose began to chase Abra's footsteps, but then ended up being injured by the girl. As Abra tried to cut her one more time, Rose managed to grab her by the throat. In the meantime, Dan's box came up behind her, and Rose realized that she was in Dan's head. Abra runs as Dan confronts Rose. She goes into his mind and sees all the fear and trauma he endured in that hotel, which allows her to start absorbing his shine. She also finds the ghost that Dan was keeping trapped. Rose noticed them, at which point Dan freed them to attack Rose. The Grady twins, the bathtub lady, and the other spirits surround Rose and consume her shine, destroying her forever. But soon they turn their attention to Dan and possess him. Dan grabs his axe and begins to chase Abra. The little girl escaped and entered room 237. She noticed the old woman in the tub, and soon after, Dan entered the room. After an emotional moment where she enters his possessed mind, bringing the real Dan back to life, he realizes that to close the door once and for all, the Overlook must burn. Unfortunately, Danny has to stay behind to get the job done, telling Abra to leave to save herself. Overloading the hotel's boiler, Danny has one last moment of peace with Wendy, his mother, before he dies in the fire. We then see Dan comfort Abra, telling her to shine and to not hide her gifts from the world. Abra tells her mother that Danny and her father are fine, and that there is an afterlife where they are at peace. Before watching TV together, Abra goes into the bathroom. The tub lady is there waiting for her, but Abra is already one step ahead of her. Click here to find out what crazy things people are willing to do for money.